Alrighty guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rawtex and today we're going to do a video on lighting in Unity and Bakery. Okay, so a friend of mine called Aaron has modelled and textured this subway car, and he was doing some test renders in Substance Painter, which looked really nice, and then he took it into Unity and was struggling getting the lighting looking right. This is an example here of how it's looking in Unity. So he's kindly provided me the model and textures for this, so I'm going to set up a little scene and light it up, get some light probes in there, get some reflection probes in there, bake a light map with Bakery, hopefully get a really nice result at the end. So I've got a blank scene here in Unity. First thing I'm going to do is bring in a little subway train tunnel that I made. Drag that into the scene, put it to the 0 position. Okay, so we've got our very basic tunnel here. It's got 2 material slots, I'm just going to plumb those in quickly. Got brick for there, and the ground I'll probably do as a sidewalk texture, so we can test out reflections and stuff. Some nice puddles on there. Okay, so here we have a completely unlit scene. In the shaded view right now, if we switch to baked light map, we see nothing at all, which is what we expect at this stage. Okay, so first off we need to light this up. So I made a very simple light box, just like this. It's 2 meshes. I split them out. You'll understand why soon. We've just got an outer box and we've got an inner box, which is going to be our emissive light source. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new game object. I'm going to call it tunnel, and that will act as our sector, and we'll get to what sectors are shortly. But I'm going to put my train tunnel in there, and then I'm going to bring in my simple light box that I made. Where is that? Okay, it's over here. Okay, so that is pretty big at the moment. I'll just put it on the floor to get the scale right. Probably something like that will be okay. Just going to open this up. For the lower part, I'm just going to use it just a basic grey material. Should be fine. And then in our materials folder, where I've got all the materials for the train, which we'll get to, I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call it emissive. Bring this down. And I'm going to say, actually everything here is fine, and in the emission intensity I'm going to take the emission intensity, put it to white, and then drag that onto this box. And at this point, right, as you can see, there's a bit of bloom around the edges, which is exactly what I want. That's a result of the post-processing volume. As you brighten that, if I bring the intensity up, you see it blooms more. Maybe about 3, a bit about right. Okay, so that box is textured as we need. Now I'm going to bring it over here, rotate it. Actually, I'm going to bring it quite a bit higher, I think, on this wall. Get that positioned right. I think that's good. And now we're going to start looking at what Bakery does. Okay, so normally in Unity you would create a light source, like a point light or a spotlight or area light. Actually, one of the things you can do with Bakery, which is quite nice, is you can actually just use a mesh as a light source. So in this case, I'm going to use this kind of chamfered light box objects, which is this bit right here. Okay, so we're going to go add component, type in Bakery, I'm going to go light mesh. First thing I do when I do a light mesh is I put the samples near 32, that to 512, the cutoff to 200. That's basically the distance if you want to have it really super far for a kind of realistic effect. I'm going to put the intensity to let's say 40. Going to make it just a little bit warm, a little bit of warmth, not too much, and that should be fine. Okay, so now I'm going to take the simple light box, put it into my tunnel object. Okay, so here with Bakery search still, I'm going to put in Bakery sector. So that is going to be, the tunnel is a sector, which is like a section of our scene, which can have independent light maps from other sectors. So this sector is going to have multiple of these light boxes and the train tunnel. So the train tunnel, I'm going to give a light map group, and that actually lets me decide the size in pixels the light map gets just for this tunnel object. So open this up. Default settings is there's no light map group selector, so you need to create one. For this tunnel, I reckon 2K will be fine. Press create new. So now, whenever this bakes, anything that's a child of train tunnel with this light map group selector is going to have the same light map, share the same texture basically, and we'll see how that works in a minute. But the sample light box, I'm just gonna come out and duplicate this a bit. I'm gonna put one not too close to the end of the tunnel, but then I'm gonna bring that to here. I think that should be good. Actually, I'm going to bring it a little bit like that. I'm going to swap to top-down view. I'm going to press Ctrl D to duplicate, bring this over here, rotate 180 degrees, and bring it along a bit so they're staggered. I think that'll work quite nicely. Okay, just going to select one of these, press F to zoom into it. And they're positioned all wrong, so let's just grab those and position them right. And that's all of them. Position those just so it's just in the wall. Okay, that should be fine. Okay, I've actually got a reflection probe here from earlier. I'm just going to delete that. So this is completely unlit scene now. No reflection probes or any lighting whatsoever. So we put our sector on. We've put a light map group selector on the train tunnel itself, and now I'm going to create a new game object. I'm going to call this lights. I'm going to put all these light boxes inside this group. Then I'm going to put a new light map group selector, and basically what's going to happen is this is the light map just for the lights itself. And this doesn't need to be big. I'll just do it 512. That'll be fine. So now we've got a sector, we've got two light map groups, one for the train tunnel model, one for the light sources, and now I'm just going to select the parent sector, mark it all as static. Now in Bakery, you can see all my options here. I've got it on experimental, shadow mask, dominant direction. What dominant direction does is it means that it bakes your normal maps in a way so that it doesn't make it all flat. So normally if you bake a light map without that, your normal maps would just disappear if it's just covered in baked lighting. If you put it on dominant direction or RNM or SH, you can retain a bit of normal map detail. You can copy my settings if you want. I've got L1 light probe mode, X atlas, adjust UV padding, pretty much everything ticked down here. Post packing, hole filling, very important, same as denoise. But most of the stuff is ticked. Max res 4K, min res 2K. Textures per unit doesn't really matter because I'm using light map group selectors, which means I'm setting my own textural density just by doing that. Bounces 2, samples 32. I mean, you can bump these up if you want a higher quality bake, more bounce, more light bounces, but it doesn't make a lot of difference, so I just leave these like that. Message boost 1, indirect boost 1, backface GI 0. RTX mode because I've got an RTX card, but if you haven't turned that off, yeah, and then GUI VRAM optimization on auto. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake this sector now. So I'm going to go choose the bakery sector with tunnel, and I'm just going to hit render. Okay, so the basic train tunnel is baked. If I swap from shaded view in the viewport to baked light map, I can see exactly what the light map looks like. I can see that actually our light mesh didn't receive any lighting, and that's by design by Bakery because they're designed to be an emissive source, which you won't really need a light map on anyway. But our boxes have been light mapped, and the train tunnel walls have been light mapped. This nice kind of soft lighting, just we want. Swap back to shaded view. So what's making this look wrong now is the reflections. If I go to these puddles, I can see the skybox, right? So to fix that, we need a reflection probe. Okay, so I'm gonna right click in the scene, gonna go create new light reflection probe. Now I'm gonna click this perspective button here, so it goes to orthographic mode. Gonna go press the kind of up arrow, so we go viewing down from the top of the scene. Gonna kind of bring this to the middle. Gonna hit this box here, modify the base shape, bring it up. Actually, I'm gonna make the blend distance 0, so we've got no blending. Now I'm gonna make that just a little bit bigger, bring it along. And that's about right. You want to get it nice and tight, really. Now I'm gonna press this, so we go into this view, and I'm gonna move it up a bit. Yeah, like I say, you want to get this quite nicely shaped so the reflections bounce off the walls correctly and the floor. So just get that positioned like this. That's positioned all the way around it. Now I'm going to tick use influence volume. Okay. Now I'm going to scroll down, hit bake. Okay, so now it's baked a reflection probe. If we bring this up, you see this basically from our capture point in the middle of the probe, it's taken like a 360 photograph basically, which we use to power the reflections. And if we go to somewhere near the middle, we should find a puddle. We can see that these lights are kind of reflecting as they should. If we didn't have use influence volume checked, that would not be the case, but once we've got that checked, everything kind of lines up nicely as it should. And it's fully baked. We've got no real-time specular going on there whatsoever. So as a base, I think this looks quite well. Maybe I would make this a bit darker, reduce the intensity of these lights a bit, but I think for now that's absolutely fine. So the next step is to bring the train in that Aaron provided us. So I've just going to grab the model for that. Okay, let's bring this in. Okay. So one of the things that I did when I was creating this train tunnel was to create Light Map Uvs for it. And I'm going to do that now for this train mesh in 3ds Max, but it should work pretty much the same in any software. So first of all, I'm going to just position this train interior so it's kind of in the right spot here. That's about right. So there's a really great plugin called UV Inspector that you can use to see what you got going on in your different UV channels. So if I click on this train tunnel and then I press the UV1 tab, so the UV1 is what I've done for my brick texture, which is fine. It can look all messed up like that. And then on the UV2 channel, you can see that I've got everything kind of spaced out into islands, which is what you want to be seeing. You want to be seeing no overlaps and just a bunch of faces that are all kind of spaced out from each other, which is perfect. Now, if we go into this tunnel, if we go into the train, I'm gonna just bring this down to the bottom here. And now if I go through these, I'm going to select the first mesh in the object, and you see that's got the UV2 for that's fine. For the second object there's no UV2, which is not good. For the main train it looks like we've got something here, but we've also got something messed up going on here as well, which we've got some overlaps because of it, which is going to cause all sorts of issues if we start baking that. This next one's got no UVs. In fact, most of them don't have any UVs, and we've got another one here which has got something there but it's messed up, something there but it's messed up, and then this one is everything's just too spaced apart, which isn't great, but that's fine, we can fix that. So I'm going to open up 3ds Max. In Unity I'm just going to select this model that we got, Show in Explorer. Okay, so 3ds Max, I'm just going to sort my viewport out. I'm going to bring this train model in. Going to just quickly zero it to the center, turn off the grid, and I've messed it up by moving it to the center, but that'll be alright where it is. Okay, so we've got this model, so open up this layer explorer, we've got all our different objects here. So what you want to be doing really is, if you've got a model like this that you're importing where you've got multiple meshes, it might be tempting just to select everything and then put an unwrap on the whole thing so every different object gets its own island, but that's not actually what you want. You want each of these meshes to have its own UV2 layout. Okay, so if I do it just for this piece at the end here, I'll go unwrap, I'll make sure I'm on the second channel. Then I would bring this open, I would make sure I'm on face mode, Control A, flatten mapping, and I would expect to see something like that. and then I would go and do that on every single object. But actually I've got a cool little plugin that will do this for me, so I'm just going to select everything, and it is not appearing. There it is. Gonna check add modifier, sorry, uncheck that, check this, and now that's what that's going to do, is it's going to go through and do the unwrap on every object one at a time, the same as what a standard unwrap would look like. It's just to save time, so I don't have to do it one by one. Okay, so that's done. I can see now that everything's been changed to editable meshes instead of editable poly, so I'm just going to Control A, convert to editable poly, and now I know that everything has got its proper kind of UV2 layout auto-generated. So I'm just going to export this back over the top of the one that we've already got in the scene. Now it's going to move a bit because I didn't position it right, but that's fine. So now if I go through all of these and look at the UV2 channel, everything's got its own setup of islands and stuff. And some of this is going to cause issues, but we'll wait and see what those issues are once we've actually done a bake. But mostly it looks fine. Okay, so I'm going to go through and apply all the materials to this. I'll fast forward this part of the video. Okay, so I've gone through and I've put all the materials on, assigned everything as they should. So what Aaron has done is, when he's painted this in Substance, is baked ambient occlusion onto the object, which actually gives it a kind of a baked look already. So you can kind of see that you kind of got a bit of darkness in these corners. These window frames are darker, whereas actually the albedo is the same, but the AO is doing quite a lot here, and it's also quite noisy, which makes it look like baked lighting. But this especially here, it looks very baked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go select all these materials, and then I'm going to uncheck emissive, and then in ambient occlusion I'm just going to drag that all the way up, and that is more like what I'd be expecting to see with an unbaked object. There it looks kind of baked. That's not what we want, because we're going to bake it anyway. So let's bring that up, and now this is looking quite flat, which is kind of exactly how I want it. Now I'm seeing a few issues here, so we kind of got this line here. I can tell that the normals are a little bit messed up on some of these objects, so we'll go back to fixing those later on. But for now we can just do a first bake to test. So going to create, we've got, actually move this reflection probe up. So we've got our tunnel sector, and now we're going to have another sector inside, which is just for this train carriage. So we call it train carriage. Going to put on another bakery sector component. Going to drag this as a child, and then for now we're just going to put one light map group selector of 2K on this, and then later on what we probably do is we'll go and put light map groups on each of these to give them higher resolution and to have more control over it. But for just a test run to test lighting, this will be fine just having one group on all of it. So let's see, we've got actually some meshes in here already which can do some lighting for us, which are designed to be light sources, which is this kind of box thing. So that is this. Going to select the material. Now I've imported the emission texture already, but I've not done anything else to set that up, so I'm just going to check use emission intensity. The emissive color by default goes to white when you do that. Going to bring the intensity up a bit. Actually, that can probably need to be tweaked once we baked anyway, so we'll just leave it at something like 3 for now. So we've got those there with an emissive texture, but actually what we want is a light source, so a bakery light mesh on there again. So we're going to go and put the light mesh on that light object. We're going to put the intensity to, let's say 5, put the cutoff to 200, 32, 512. This is just a test, probably have to tweak this intensity value, but for now we can do it as a test. So going to make sure that I've checked this sector as static and all of its children. Now I'm going to select that sector. So as we can see, this one is baked already. We don't want to bake that again, so by using bakery sectors we can just bake this and we will retain this bake, which is really handy and time saving feature. So selected the train carriage to bake, so let's go ahead and bake it. Okay, so the bake is done. As we can see here, we've got some major issues here. So what steps can we take to try and work out what this issue is? So whenever you bake an object and then click on it, you will see here, if it's marked as static, see if I untick it, it goes, but if it's marked as static, you will see the light map images being applied to it. So if we press open preview, we kind of get this preview of the light map. We've got a little option up here which turns the wireframe on or off. We've also got a control for the exposure, which can be quite handy, because light maps are HDR, which means they go over more of a range than white to black. It's a much more of a higher range, so that's what HDR means. So you can adjust the exposure to see a particular part of that range, and then you can turn the wireframe on. So this looks fine. You can see we've got different lights on each bit, as it should. But this is looking crazy. So what we would expect to see is a big atlas light map where all these different objects are spread out across the atlas. So if we click into one of these and hit preview, I can see that this wireframe is overlapped with all of the other wireframes. And now if I click another one, open preview again, I can see that that's just taking up the whole light map. This is taking up the whole light map. Every single object there is being kind of wireframed over. So what's causing that? If we go into console and I come up, I'll see a bunch of errors here. Not allowed to access UV on mesh handrails. Get UV, which is causing this issue. Alright, so I'm going to go back, going to select the mesh, going to go model select, so select it in our scene, and then I'm going to find read write enabled, check that, apply, and let's render again. Okay, so the bake is done. It's looking a lot better this time. If we swap from shaded view to baked light map view, we'll see exactly what's going on with our light map here. We can see that actually the light map's a little bit yellow in this tunnel because we put a little bit of yellow on those light meshes, but inside the train itself is quite white, which is maybe that's the look we want to go for. You can change those if you want. We can see our light mesh didn't get baked at all, which we don't want it to because it's going to be emissive anyway. But our light mesh is being used as our emissive source, so you can see that the light is fading out from that source. So if you adjust the exposure slider in the bake light map view, you can kind of see the different ranges of the bake as well. So this bake is looking quite nice, looking quite clean, but as with all light bakes, you normally find a few little issues, so we'll see if we can find any of those. So what I'm seeing here is we've got some weird stuff going on with this little object here. So what could be causing that? Well, let's select the object and have a look at what it's doing in the light map. So it looks to me like we've got a lot of split out objects here, and we've got a lot of objects that aren't really getting many bits of space. So we've got these objects right here that they're sharing literally 2 pixels for that one object, which isn't great. It's not going to look great, and see that's happening for quite a few of these different objects. And we've also got a lot of wasted space, all this wasted black, which really we want to be filling that with light map data, right? So how can we fix that? Well, to start off with, this is one massive mesh. If we come out, turn this mesh off, you can see that is a lot of stuff being baked into one object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split that into a few objects, and then we'll see about what happened with what happened over here because the line's looking really weird. In fact, we can have a look at that first. So we used an auto unwrap for this, which is fine most of the time, but sometimes it's not. So I'm just going to isolate this and maybe look at it from this angle. So now I'm going to put an unwrap on the second UV channel, and I can immediately see what the issue is here. So for some of this stuff, it's kind of unwrapped it okay. The window's a bit weird here. You can see the little line showing where the islands are, but for these bits it's done a really weird job of unwrapping that into loads of different islands, which lines up with exactly the issues that we're seeing here. Now this could be fixed by just increasing the resolution of our light map to something like 4K just for this object, which could work, but actually what you would be doing really is splitting this out into a few different objects and then giving them a custom unwrap. So we can see what the issue is there. Let's see what we can do to fix it. I'm going to take that modifier off. Let's see what I can select here. So we've got 4 different objects, sub-objects in this mesh, so I'm just going to literally just split those out. Okay. I'm just going to rename these new parts to okay. Let's turn off these 2 for now. Okay, so now we've just got these bits appearing. So I'm gonna do my auto unwrap again just on these selected bits. Which is gonna go and do it again. Then I'm gonna convert them all to editable polys again. And now let me see, I'm gonna hide this. Gonna put an unwrap on the UV2 channel again for this. Let me see, it's unwrapped in exactly the same way again, which is fine. It doesn't know exactly what to do for complex geometry like this, but we can fix that quite easily. So I'm gonna open up UV editor. Gonna make sure I check this, which is ignore back facing. And as you can see, we've got these different blocks here, which are actually, we've even got a bit of overlap here, which isn't good, but we can fix that. So what we're going to do, we're going to put on wireframe mode, going to select this area, make sure I've got all of those. Now I'm going to open up a little plugin I've got called texture tools. Then I'm going to iron, which moves it to its own island, but then there's a bit of weirdness going on here. Then I'm going to relax, which gives everything a lot more equal space. I'm going to do the same thing over here, iron and relax. And then I'm going to take this top part, going to iron and relax that. And that has created a bit of weirdness as well, so I'll probably split this out by going something like, probably iron and relax that bit on its own. Iron and relax that bit. And then probably cut this down the middle. Iron relax that bit. Actually no, that has done something very weird there. I'm going to Control Z that back to how it was. Actually I'll just leave that how it is. And now I want to pack these all into this square, so I'll just use pack custom, which is fine. And actually I'm just going to give everything a little bit more space. Will that fit up here? Okay, so that's fine. So now we've unwrapped that little doorway just right. I'm going to collapse that. And now I'm going to go and do the exact same thing on the other door, and I'm just going to speed this part of the video up. Alright, so I fixed up the model, re-imported, got the materials assigned again, and got it kind of all textured as it should be. So Now we've kind of fixed those UV issues that we had there before, I'm just going to bake again and see kind of what results we get this time. Okay, so we're back, and let's have a look and see if we've kind of fixed those issues that we had before. So come and look at this object now. Now it's got the custom unwrap. We can see that it's looking a lot better than it was. If we go to Bake Light Map View, we can also see that these checkers kind of show us where any issues might be as well. If we'd looked at it before, you'd have seen all types of craziness going on there. But now that's fixed, and you can see the seam that I made when I unwrapped this on this island. You should be able to see another seam up here as well, and that's fine. So that's actually looking pretty good. And there might be a few more issues, so if we go to these windows, you can see that there's some weird seams going on here. So if I had more time, and I want to spend more time on this, I would go and do some custom unwraps on all these places where I see these issues like this. See if we can find any more. But basically what you want to do is you want to go through seeing if you can spot any little issues, and then if you need to, just do a custom unwrap. Instead of using an auto unwrapper, you can just do a custom. As you can see here as well, this is all types of messed up with our auto unwrap. The same as down the bottom here. If we look at the actual bake, it's looking kind of weird. So exactly what I did with a custom unwrap for this, I would any place that I see issues, I would just go and do a custom UV for it. Spend as much time as you want. The more time you spend getting those UVs perfected, the better the light bake will be, basically. But I'm happy with this for now. And so the next bit is going to be tweaking these materials and getting a reflection probe set up with the train and getting the reflections looking right. And maybe bringing back a bit of the ambient occlusion that we had on those baked maps, and maybe some other bit and some light probes. So let's start off by giving this a higher resolution bake. Now that we know that we've got some good UVs and it's baking right with a nice clean bake, we can think about giving this a bit more space. So the issue that we're seeing here with this dark patch, that's literally just because we don't have enough resolution for that. So if I select this object and then have a look at it here, you can see the yellow part is just the bit that we've been looking at. I'm not sure which bit are the windows here, but we can see that there's not much space that I think this is the window here. There's not much space for some of these parts. See, there's these little cubes here that have less than 1 pixel of light map space, which isn't great. And also we can see that there's a lot of black wasted space here as well. So what I'm going to do to solve that is, instead of having a light map group which is just one 2K texture for the whole train carriage, I'm going to create some more light map groups and split these out. So I might have the floor as one light map group, the benches another group, and so on. So because this is a model, I can't reorder anything in it, so I'm just going to duplicate that for now. I'm going to turn this one off, get rid of the light map group selector. In fact, I'm just going to take it out of it altogether. And I'm going to mark it as unstatic as well. So now we've got this one, and I'm going to unpack prefab completely, which means now we've got all our original models, and if we update the FPX, these will update as long as the name stays the same. So let's create a few empty game objects in here for plonking different bits and pieces into. So I'm going to call one main train parts. I'm going to make another one for the rails, doors, gangway. So I'm going to grab these two gangways, put them in gangway. Okay, so now we've got everything split into these separate groups. So on our actual our parent of this, we've put in this light map group selector. We're going to remove that, and instead we're going to put these on here. So let's swap back to this. So our seats, this is where you can start deciding how much light map space each different object gets. These seats, I reckon 1024 for those. The train floor, you want a nice bit of detail in the shadow, so I'll probably do that as 1024. The lights don't get baked, so we don't actually even need one on those. Actually, we'll do it anyway, just in case we get any weirdness. We'll give it 512. Main train part, so this is our 4 objects, which is the majority of the train. So I'm going to make this quite big. I'm going to make this 4K one, which should give us a nice bit of detail. The rails, probably 1024. The doors, 1024, probably fine for those. The gangways, 1024 for that. So what I'll do now is I'll bake this and I'll see how it's looking. So this is all a part of our train carriage sector, so I'll just bake the train carriage sector again. Okay, so we're back, it's baked. So let's inspect the light maps that it's made. So this main train parts, we can see this actually hasn't atlased this well. We've got a lot of black space here. One thing we could do to fix that would be to just do a light map group slice on each of these parts, instead of it all combining into one that gets atlased weirdly like this. But this has got a lot of detail now. If we zoom in, we can see the pixels are kind of been given a lot of space to a lot of different objects. Now if we come in and swap to bake light map and look closely at some stuff, we can see it's all very highly detailed. Now what this meant was that the bake took a lot longer. The more light maps that you're baking and the larger they are, the longer it takes, of course. That one with all these different groups and the 4K main parts took 2 minutes. Before it was taking about 30 seconds. So yeah, the higher res you make it, the longer it's going to take, but you know, the better results you'll get as well. But I'm actually happy with how this is looking. So if I come back to the materials that Aaron provided me, I took the ambient occlusion of this before, so if I show you what that looks like with it on, it makes everything way too dark. So basically what's happening here is we've got two light maps. We've got our bakery light map and the substance light map. Bring it all the way up, it's off, but maybe just bringing a little bit of that in does add a bit of something extra. Leave it about there, I reckon. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to set up a light probe. So you might be thinking I've got this light probe out here already. So if I click this light probe, I made this light probe, which is a probe that's taking a picture of the tunnel, which is fine. And at the moment that's being used for the inner of the train as well. So we can see this reflection here is the light source outside of the train. So what we actually want to do is we want to have another light probe that's just for the train. But how's that going to work? What you can actually do is you can nest the reflection probes inside one another, and how is that going to mean that the brick tunnel uses one and the inside part uses another? So actually what happens is it works by scale. So the smallest reflection probe, the one that's inside another, takes priority. So we're going to have this large reflection probe around the whole tunnel, and then we're going to create a small one around this train, and then everything that's inside of it, the train itself will use that smaller one, and the tunnel that's larger will use the larger one. So let's get that set up. So I'm going to select this reflection probe, going to duplicate that. It's going to rename that probe inner. Going to rename the outer one probe tunnel. Okay, going to swap to isographic mode again. Gonna swap to the top to start with. Gonna edit the box so it's just around the train. And again, you want to get this nice and tight to the train itself, because I through the reflections will kind of be a bit off. So let's get that centered up. More time you spend getting this perfect, the better the results will be, for sure. And I think that's about right, maybe just a little bit smaller. Okay. Jump out of isographic view. So again, this is baked with the tunnel. So now that we've got the train here and the capture point is in the middle of the train, now it's going to capture a picture of the middle of the train. So let's hit bake on this. As you can see, now we've got a light probe for the inner of the tunnel, inner of the train, and we've got a light probe for the outside part. So this is still working. I can see in the puddles that these lights from the tunnel are reflecting as they should. And then in here we should be getting some reflections. So one of the most important parts with getting something looking right is the materials as well. So what I'm going to do is change some of these materials, make them a bit more reflective and so on. So these windows, too light, so I'm just going to darken those up a bit. I'm going to make them more reflective. If we look in those windows, we can see that we've got reflections looking about right, but actually the reflection's messing up a little bit because of the normals. Okay, so that'd be a case of going back into our modelling software and fixing those up. But for now that'll be fine. We can see our reflections enough. Okay, I'm going to make the benches a little bit more reflective. Just drag the smoothness up. You actually see that the reflection is a bit weird on those as well because of the normal. So I'm just going to go back into here, select the benches, do a weighted normals on that, collapse, and export again. Now we should see this update and fix itself. We didn't, because sometimes Unity doesn't like to update stuff for us, so we'll just go re-import. And now these reflections are looking kind of positioned more like they should be. This window on these doors aren't reflective, but I don't think I can fix that. So all in all, this light basically looking pretty good. We've got our reflections in here. We've actually, this floor could actually be a lot more reflective. This, bring the smoothness up on that. Bring the top part down a bit. That's reflected in the doorways quite nicely. We've got normal map on there, which I'm just going to get that reduced so it's looking about alright. It's good like that. And there we have it. That's baked quite nicely. So what's next? A light probe group. So I'm gonna create a new light probe group like this. Now by default we have a few of these squares that have been put in to the scene for us. Let's actually swap to ISO view. So we got set up like this right now. So actually going to create them for the tunnel first. So we're going to just position these kind of like this. I'm going to select these two, put them to the middle of the tunnel, duplicate them, move that there, and then I'm going to take this, duplicate those to there, duplicate that to there, duplicate that to there. Probably take these and move them to the outsides of the train carriage, and like that as well. Pop these up here, probably bring these in a bit, just so they're kind of wrapping around the carriage. And then I'm going to do some inside the carriage as well. I'm going to put some there, 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 and we'll probably come and fix those up and position them a bit better in a minute. But for now, that should be fine. If I go to looking at it from the side, they're just down this one end at the moment, so I'm just going to select all of them, duplicate, Control A, Control D, Control A, Control D, and just duplicate all of these out. And then just do these ones as well. Okay, so what do light probes do? So light probes, for each of these little circles, they capture what the light is doing at each point. So for this little probe right here, it's going to be saying that there's light coming from this way, and then it's kind of shadowed this way. And that's basically how light probes work. And why do we need them? So for our baked objects, we don't need them. This train or the walls or any of the stuff that's got a baked line is not going to be using these light probes whatsoever. The only thing that's going to use them is dynamic objects. So like our player or a skateboard or whatever, it's going to be using these probes to light up. So we're going to say if the skate is here, it's going to be nice and bright because he's under this light, but if he's here, he's going to be darker. Now, how can we test that? I mean, building this map and loading it up in a game or whatever is going to take a lot of time. What we can actually do is just use a sphere. So you bring one of these in. Get the position right. So at the moment, this sphere has because there's no light probes baked this is, it's just the same color everywhere. And what we can do once we've got our light probes baked is we will see this sphere changing in how it's lit based on that light probe data that we will bake. So let's see how we can do that. First, I'm just going to fix these light probes inside the train. So we've got, going to swap back to the ISO mode. Look at it downways. Going to select these ones. Okay, let's going to select these ones. I'm going to bring them down, duplicate again, and I'm going to take this down here so it's like under the benches. Another one here so it's under the benches. Now I'm going to swap to wireframe view. That should help me spot where those benches are a bit easier. I'm going to take that and move it to about there. Move that to about there. And honestly, just like that, it should be fine. So, one of the issues with bakery sectors is that when we bake a sector, it doesn't bake our light probes. So if we want to bake our light probes for the whole scene, we need to bake everything all together instead of doing just one sector at a time, which is a bit time consuming, but you don't have to do it that often. You can just do it once when you're right at the end of your project. So we've got these light probes set up in the right spots. I'll just double check that they're actually these ones that aren't in a great position, but I think that should be fine for now. So we're gonna go and bake the whole scene instead of just the sectors. So down here where we choose a selector, I'm just gonna choose none, and then when we hit render, it's gonna bake all the sectors all together, but still split out into their separate groups. But it's also gonna bake the light probes as well, and we need to make sure we got light probe mode set to L1 for that to work. So I'm going to go ahead and bake that. So that's baked. Now let's use our dynamic sphere to see if the light probes have worked. So now if we move this sphere to in front of this light, it's kind of bright. If we move it away, it gets darker. And if we move it over here, we should see the light starts coming from this side. Move over here, we should see the light changing to come from the other way. And that's exactly what we want. So now this light is giving it this dynamic lighting on the top part. If we move over here, we'll see that the light works just like that way as well. We bring it into the middle of the train. You can see it's nice and bright. And I think if we move it under the benches, it should get a bit darker. And if we move it down the side of the carriage, it's kind of dark, really dark down there, as you'd expect it to be. So that's fine. But what you might actually notice is that this is a bit jumpy. Like the light is jumping from really bright to really dark, and that is simply because we don't have enough light probes. So if we see this, we can see that I've got them lined up in these grids. So what you might want is more resolution for those, right? So if you want more resolution, you can just select them all, Control A, Control D to duplicate, and then just move them along. Maybe I would drag it so it's like that. So there's a lot more. Maybe you wouldn't need all these. Maybe you would just delete these ones at the top as well, because the player's never going to be there. But this is just to give you an idea of what light probes do and how to set them up. The more you have, the more detailed the lighting will be. Also, the longer it will take to bake. So you can kind of optimize it by putting them where you need them, having them kind of quite packed close to each other. But for this demonstration, that's fine. We know that they're working, and that's fine. Delete our sphere, and that is pretty much the end of this tutorial. The lighting looks good. If I was to work on this some more, maybe I would add some more light sources in. Maybe I'd put some little circular lights here, build those in to get a nice bit of extra light in. But the reflections look good, the light looks good. But one thing we could do is spend a bit more time fixing up the normals of our different objects so the reflections look a bit better. So if you look at these benches, the reflections are a little bit weird there still, and the reflections are a little bit weird on these windows because of the curvature. And I did the easy weighted normals modifier in 3ds Max on this, which is fixed it a little bit but not perfectly, so that those weird reflections are caused by that. Maybe I would probably up the reflectiveness of a lot of these materials so you can see the reflections more. Maybe on these, I think it's the main train. Maybe if I make that more reflective, bring the normal map down a bit, and then you would get more reflections on these plastic panels. It's all a bit of a balancing act. For something like this, you would want it quite shiny, so I'd probably sit here and spend a bit of time playing with all these materials, getting everything looking right. Maybe darker, lighter on different areas. Playing around the normal maps, but for the basics, I think that's the basics of lighting really. So hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.